The Book of Revelation, chapter 13. In our previous studies of chapters 11 and 12 of the Book of Revelation, we saw that in the second half of Revelation 11, the seventh trumpet had sounded, signifying the return of Jesus Christ. In chapter 12, we saw a conflict between a celestial woman and the dragon. This chapter revealed the primary antagonist and protagonist in our story of the book of Revelation. We saw that the celestial woman represented the new covenant community and its conflict with Satan the devil from the time of Jesus Christ down to the Great Tribulation. Chapter 13 of the book of Revelation continues this vision about the celestial woman and the red dragon and introduces the final two antagonists of the celestial woman. In chapter 13, we see God's revelation about the sea beast and the land beast. Beginning now in Revelation chapter 13, verse 1, "And the dragon stood on the sand of the seashore, and I saw a beast coming up out of the sea, having 10 horns and 7 heads, and on his horns were 10 diadems, and on his heads were blasphemous names. And the beast which I saw was like a leopard, and his feet were like those of a bear, his mouth like the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power and his throne and great authority. I saw one of his heads as if it had been slain, and his fatal wound was healed. And the whole earth was amazed and followed after the beast." Revelation 13, verse 4, "They worshipped the dragon because he gave his authority to the beast. And they worshipped the beast, saying, 'Who is like the beast, and who is able to wage war with him?' There was given to him a mouth speaking arrogant words and blasphemies, and authority to act for 42 months was given to him. And he opened his mouth in blasphemies against God, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle, that is, those who dwell in heaven." Revelation 13, verse 7, "It was also given to him to make war with the saints and to overcome them, and authority over every tribe and people and tongue and nation was given to him. All who dwell on the earth will worship him, everyone whose name has not been written from the foundation of the world in the book of life of the Lamb who has been slain. If anyone has an ear, let him hear. If anyone is destined for captivity, to captivity he goes. And if anyone kills with the sword he must be killed. Here is the perseverance and the faith of the saints." The first thing that we see in this passage is that the sea beast is the kingdom of Satan. This beast that comes out of the sea has 7 heads and 10 horns. In other words, the silhouette of this creature is like the red dragon, and it receives power and a throne from the dragon. In other words, this government, this world power, has a satanic origin. It comes up out of the sea and has body parts from a leopard, a bear, and a lion, which is directly related to the vision that Daniel saw in Daniel chapter 7. It is a combination of the 4 beasts that Daniel saw in his vision in Daniel chapter 7, which represents 4 ancient Gentile kingdoms that oppressed the people of Israel. This vision also matches the vision of Daniel chapter 2, which predicted the coming of the same 4 Gentile kingdoms. Let's take a moment to review the prophecies of Daniel chapter 2 and Daniel chapter 7 and compare them with the beast that comes out of the sea in Revelation chapter 13. In Daniel chapter 2, there was a statue made of 4 different metals. The interpretation of that vision is that the head of gold represented the Babylonian Empire. The silver chest and arms represented the Medo-Persian Empire. The belly and thighs of bronze represented the Greco-Macedonian Empire, and the two legs of iron represented the two halves of the Roman Empire. This corresponds with the four beasts that Daniel saw in Daniel chapter 7. He saw a lion, which represented the Babylonian Empire, a bear, which represented the Persian Empire, a leopard with four heads that represented the Greco-Macedonian Empire, and a beast with iron teeth, which represented the Roman Empire. In Revelation chapter 13, the beast that John saw had 7 heads. This is a combination of the head from the lion, 1 head from the bear, 4 heads from the leopard, and 1 head from the iron beast, a total of 7 heads. And just as Daniel saw that on the head of the iron beast there were 10 horns, so too John sees a beast with 10 horns. So these prophecies all correspond one with another. Daniel chapter 2, Daniel chapter 7, and Revelation chapter 13 are all talking about a succession of Gentile empires that have oppressed the people of Israel. The second thing that we see in this passage is that the sea beast is a future Neo-Roman Empire. That is, it will be a resurrection or a restoration of the ancient Roman Empire. In Revelation chapter 13, verse 3, it says that one of the heads of this 7-headed beast received a fatal wound, which was then healed. In Daniel chapter 2, Daniel saw in his vision that the iron legs became feet of iron mixed with potter's clay, depicting the death and restoration of the ancient Roman Empire. In 476 A.D., Rome fell, but it came back to life with a blasphemous name as the Holy Roman Empire, which ruled Europe throughout the Middle Ages. The 10 horns with 10 royal crowns represent the 10 kings that will rule in the future over this Neo-Roman Empire, which is described in Daniel chapter 2, verses 40 through 44, and Daniel chapter 7, verses 23 through 25. Daniel chapter 2, verse 40, "Then there will be a 4th kingdom, which is Rome, as strong as iron, inasmuch as iron crushes and shatters all things, so, like iron that breaks in pieces, it will crush and break all these in pieces. In that you saw the feet and toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, it will be a divided kingdom, but it will have in it the toughness of iron, inasmuch as you saw the iron mixed with common clay. As the toes of the feet were partly of iron and partly of pottery, so some of the kingdom will be strong, and part of it will be brittle." Daniel chapter 2, verse 43, "And in that you saw the iron mixed with common clay, they will combine with one another in the seed of men, and they will not adhere to one another, even as iron does not combine with pottery. In the days of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which will never be destroyed, and that kingdom will not be left for another people. It will crush and put an end to all these kingdoms, but it will itself endure forever." Daniel chapter 7, verse 23, "Thus he said, the 4th beast, which represents Rome, will be a 4th kingdom on the earth, which will be different from all the other kingdoms, and will devour the whole earth, and tread it down and crush it. As for the 10 horns, out of this kingdom 10 kings will arise, and another will arise after them, and he will be different from the previous ones, and will subdue or overthrow 3 kings. And he will speak out against the Most High, and wear down the saints of the Highest One, and he will intend to make alterations in times and in law, and they will be given into his hand for a time, times, and half a time. Looking back again at our table, which compares the prophecies of Daniel chapter 2, Daniel chapter 7, and Revelation chapter 13, we see then that the feet of iron and clay represent the Holy Roman Empire, and the toes of that statue represent this future Neo-Roman Empire. This corresponds with the 10 horns on the iron beast of Daniel chapter 7 and the 10 horns of the beast of Revelation 13. The 11th horn that we saw described in Daniel chapter 7 represents the Antichrist. This is the beast that comes up out of the sea, the beast that no one can wage war against. It is a future resurrection of the Roman Empire led by the Antichrist, which will have power over the earth for 42 months. That's the 42 months of the Great Tribulation, when the beast that comes up out of the sea will wage war against the children of the celestial woman. It is interesting to note that the European Union today includes most of the old Roman Empire within its territories, along with some new nations, which fits the description of Daniel chapter 2, verses 40 through 44, and Daniel chapter 7, verses 23 through 25. It is a mixture of the nations of the old Roman Empire with new nations, and they do not adhere one to another. There are too many different cultures, languages, and customs. They are partly strong and partly weak. Some people claim that the sea beast can't be the European Union because the 10 horns represent 10 kings, but the European Union today has 27 nations. However, the sea beast could be a subset of these current 27 nations, or several nations may drop out of the European Union in the future, as Britain did recently. Or the 10 kings might rule over 10 groups of nations, so this objection is without merit. Other people think that the sea beast will be a union of 10 Arab Muslim nations in the Middle East, but this goes against other prophecies that we've already covered. Daniel chapter 2 shows that the iron legs that represented Rome and the feet of iron and clay, representing the Holy Roman Empire, are similar to each other. They are European nations, not nations in the Middle East. Daniel chapter 11, verses 40 through 43 says that at the end time, the king of the north, in other words, the Antichrist, will attack the king of the south and occupy Egypt, Libya, and Sudan. So the king of the north is attacking nations in the Middle East. So the sea beast won't be a group of Arab Muslim nations. The third thing that we see in this passage in Revelation 13 is that the sea beast is victorious for a period of 42 months. People will worship the beast, saying, "Who is like the beast, and who is able to wage war with him?" This corresponds to the prophecy of Daniel chapter 7, verse 24. As for the 10 horns, out of this kingdom 10 kings will arise, and another will arise after them, and he will be different from the previous ones, and will subdue 3 of those kings. So there will be some kind of coup d'etat that will take place that will propel this 11th horn to a position of power, sole rulership over this conglomeration of 10 nations or groups of nations. Daniel chapter 11, verses 40 through 43 says that at the end time, the king of the north, this beast that rises out of the sea, will fight against the king of the south and will occupy the nations of Israel, Egypt, Libya, and Sudan. So at the beginning of his reign, there will be a great worldwide conflict. Revelation chapter 6 implies that he will kill approximately 25% of all of humanity in this war. The fourth thing that we see in this passage is that the sea beast will persecute God's people. Daniel chapter 7 verse 25 says, "He will defy the Most High and oppress the holy people of the Most High. He will try to change their sacred festivals and laws, and they will be placed under his control for a time, times, and half a time." As we look back at the prophecies of Daniel chapter 2 and Daniel chapter 7, we see that these ancient kingdoms, these ancient Gentile oppressor kingdoms, have tried to stamp out God's people, God's book, and God's Torah commandments, especially the observance of the seventh-day Sabbath. Since the time of the Seleucid Empire in the 2nd century BC, all the way up through the Roman Empire and into the Middle Ages, these oppressor Gentile kingdoms have systematically waged war against God's Sabbaths and have tried to outlaw them and institute mandatory Sunday worship. So the Antichrist will try to abolish God's Torah, God's Sabbaths, and mandate Sunday worship. This will occur in the second half of Daniel's 70th heptad, the 3.5 years represented by the Great Tribulation. This corresponds with the 5th seal of Revelation chapter 6, when the red dragon makes war on the children of the celestial woman, as we saw in Revelation chapter 12, verse 14 and verse 17. Moving on now to Revelation chapter 13, verse 11. "Then I saw another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spoke as a dragon. He exercises all the authority of the first beast in his presence, and he makes the earth and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast, whose fatal wound was healed. He performs great signs, so that he even makes fire come down out of heaven to the earth in the presence of men. And he deceives those who dwell on the earth because of the signs which it was given him to perform in the presence of the beast, telling those who dwell on the earth to make an image to the beast who had the wound of the sword and has come to life." Revelation 13, verse 15, "And it was given to him to give breath to the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast would even speak and cause as many as do not worship the image of the beast to be killed. And he causes all, the small and the great, and the rich and the poor, and the free men and the slaves, to be given a mark on their right hand or on their forehead. And he provides that no one will be able to buy or to sell except the one who has the mark, either the name of the beast or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for the number is that of a man, and his number is 666. The first thing that we see in this passage is that the land beast is a satanic religious leader. The sea beast is a political and military leader, but the beast that comes up out of the land or out of the earth is a false prophet. He looks like a lamb, that is, outwardly he appears to be like Jesus, like a Christian, but this is a disguise. He speaks like a dragon. It is interesting that Jesus told his disciples in the Sermon on the Mount to beware of the false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravenous wolves. False religious teachers often disguise themselves in a cloak of righteousness. Outwardly they appear to be servants of Jesus Christ. But as Paul noted in 2 Corinthians chapter 11, these men are actually servants of Satan. And no wonder, because Satan himself appears as an angel of light. He is always trying to counterfeit what God is doing, but it is a twisted and perverted system that he is bringing to humans. This land beast has satanic power to perform great supernatural signs. This is consistent with what the Apostle Paul prophesied in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 9. The coming of the lawless one, that is, the Antichrist, is by the activity of Satan with all power and false signs and wonders. The land beast deceives people into worshiping the sea beast. It is interesting to note that kings in the ancient Near East routinely claimed to be gods and demanded to be worshipped as gods. We see this in passages throughout the Bible, such as Isaiah chapter 14, verses 12 through 14, and Daniel chapter 6, verses 6 and 7, which is consistent with what Paul predicted about the Antichrist wanting to be worshipped, as we see in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 4. In fact, the imperial cult of Rome worshipped the Roman emperor as Lord, Savior, and Son of God. The Roman Emperor Domitian demanded that his subjects worship him as Lord and God. It was this same Roman Emperor Domitian who exiled John to Patmos because of his Christian faith. Decades later, the Roman Empire martyred Christians because they refused to worship the genius of Caesar, that is, Caesar's divine qualities. This false prophet deceives people into making an image of the sea beast and worshiping this idol under pain of death, just as the Roman Empire had done centuries earlier. This false prophet even makes the image appear to speak. Grant Osborne notes in his commentary, Revelation verse by verse, that it was popularly believed in the first century that the gods did inhabit their idols, and rituals existed to call forth the spark of the divine in them. The Roman world was enamored with magicians and rituals. Such deception was not unknown in the ancient world. A man named Hieron of Alexandria, who lived in the first century, designed several types of mechanical devices to simulate temple miracles. This included one machine that made a trumpet play when the doors of the temple were opened. Also, a coin-operated holy water dispenser, an early version of a vending machine, and a device for opening temple doors using heat and water power to move pulleys and weights in order to make it appear that the doors opened without human hands. So throughout the ancient world, there were always tricksters and magicians who were trying to deceive people. You might remember in Acts chapter 8, the apostles encountered a magician in Samaria named Simon, and Paul and Barnabas encountered a magician called Elymas during their missionary journeys as well. It may well be that these individuals were simply using sleight of hand or tricks to deceive people, but they may also have been backed up by satanic supernatural power. The second thing that we see in this passage is that the land beast imposes the mark of the beast. He forces everyone to receive a mark, some kind of tattoo or brand, on their hand or their forehead with the name of the sea beast or the number of his name, in order to identify them as his followers. Again, Grant Osborne says in his Revelation commentary, in Roman practice, religious tattoos were often worn to indicate a person's patron god. It signified both the rejection of former loyalties and absolute acceptance of the new allegiance. And so it was a definitive, permanent sign or mark of a covenant between a worshiper and his god or goddess in the ancient Roman world. In the future, this mark of the beast will represent a final and total rejection of Jesus Christ. It is an unpardonable sin to receive the mark of the beast. We see that the land beast imposes this mark on the hand or the forehead. The hand denotes actions and deeds, that is, the works of one's hands, while the forehead denotes thoughts and plans. So the beast is marking his authority over all aspects of life. Every sphere of human life is covered under one's thoughts and deeds. This is very similar to the kinds of signs that God gives to his people, as we see in Exodus chapter 13, verses 9 and 16, as well as Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 8. For example, after the flood, God told Noah, "I have set my rainbow in the clouds, and it will be a sign of the covenant between me and the earth." So God used something visible, something physical, to mark out or be a sign of a covenant between himself and the people of the earth. In Exodus chapter 31, verse 13, God told Moses, "Say to the Israelites, you must observe my Sabbaths. It will be a sign between me and you for the generations to come, so that you may know that I am the Lord who makes you holy." This is why Satan always is trying to outlaw Sabbath keeping and impose mandatory Sunday worship. He is trying to stamp out God's Torah and change God's festivals and seasons. They represent a sign between God and his people. Satan wants to put his mark, his sign, on his people. The land beast also imposes economic sanctions on those who refuse to accept this mark of the beast. So it must be, in some sense, visible to other people. The number of his name refers to the ancient practice of using letters of the alphabet to represent numbers. Most people are familiar with Roman numerals. They look like letters of the alphabet, but they stand for numbers. Greeks and Hebrews had an equivalent system in their alphabet. So this process of calculating the number of a person's name by substituting the letters for the numbers that it represents may provide an early clue for the identity of the sea beast. But no one will be able to be sure about the identity of the sea beast until it is too late, when he enters the temple of God and seats himself there claiming to be God. By that time, it will be time to flee for the mountains. The number 7 appears throughout the Bible and denotes the completion of the Creator's work. For example, God created the heavens and the earth on 6 days and rested on the 7th day, the Sabbath day. The number 6 is one less than that perfection and is associated with the creation of humanity and the 6 days of human labor. So the number 777 would be naturally associated with God the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, while 666 would represent the false trinity that we see here in Revelation chapters 12 and 13, a false trinity of Satan, the sea beast, and the land beast. In Revelation chapter 20, verse 10, it is listed as Satan, the beast, and the false prophet. Revelation chapter 14 will bring us to the conclusion of the story of what happens at the sounding of the 7th trumpet.